Chief, thank you, thank you. What you said made a lot of sense. This lecture is quite elaborate, and you will see the way we receive this lecture through our questions and further interactions that will follow suit. But first of all, I would like to invite Professor Enabulele. I would like to invite Professor Enabulele.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Chief. We're
Yeah.
so grateful. We didn't expect this. You've touched on a lot of things. I'm sure if we gave you 4 hours, you will. Thank you so very much. I made a brief note of the things that you touched upon. You touched upon colonialism, which is very important. The use of force by non-state actors, which is what we're facing now, because as you did mention, when the UN Charter was crafted in 1945, the menace of non-state actors was not there. So Article 2.4 did not actually take cognizance of their presence, and now we are having this issue. And especially, you mentioned the Sahel region. That's the kind of cooperation that needs to exist between ECOWAS as it is now and the states on the Sahel, because we can't deal with insecurity without them. It's just not possible. You have mentioned that. And the Gulf of Guinea, you were going into maritime because we do maritime as well. And I said, oh my God, are we going to have all of that? Your thoughts on the Gulf of Guinea, very apt, because you see Iran taking charge of the Persian Gulf, for instance. Who takes charge of the Gulf of Guinea? And these are matters that need to be addressed. But you made fundamental points that we often overlook, because sometimes when we criticize ECOWAS, when we say a lot of things that we say, we do not see the background, we do not see the hand behind it. Now today you have been able to unravel, to make us understand that, look, there are it may be the hand of Esau, the voice of I don't know how Esau is the hand of Esau, but the voice of Jacob or whatever, So it may be something that we need to, and you talked about the economy of the ocean and the need for a meaningful dialogue between ECOWAS and the Saharan states. I think ECOWAS did try that dialogue. They are still on it. I don't know. We have a case at the moment at the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice, on this issue of exit. And also, we did a survey before ECOWAS turned 50 just to see what ECOWAS, how this, because it was so easy. We looked at the ease at which Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger pulled out of ECOWAS. Their citizens were not even bothered, So we said, is ECOWAS, does it really make sense to the citizens? So we did that survey, and, we had a discussion on that last time. And the last point that you made that is so fundamental for us to take away is the change of constitutional term. At the moment, we are preparing a case at the center concerning Cote d'Ivoire, Togo, and the Gambia. I'm surprised that even the Gambia is towing the same path. Barrow was somebody that was brought into office by ECOWAS. And ECOWAS seems to be quiet when these things are happening. So if you can't deal with the change of constitutional term, suppression of people and human rights in order to prolongate your stay in office, then when there's a coup, ECOWAS begins to hold authority of heads of state and government begins to hold meetings. So, and these are very fundamental matters. You also mentioned the sanctions against Nigeria, like Nigeria turning off the power. Niger went to court on that matter, but the court had another idea because of the issue of jurisdiction. So the whole 1 hour you packed a lot of things into it, and that they can a lot of discussions can come out of this. And I can assure you that we're going to continue this discussion. We're going to pick up from the things that you have said, quite a lot of things for us to digest. Thank you so very much. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Thank you so much. Okay, Prof, we have a question here from one of our participants. Okay, the question goes those. From your lecture, you mentioned the war in the southern Cameroon. Is France involved in this war or Cameroon Republic? If Cameroon, how come a formal UN trust territory become colonized by another former UN trust territory?
I was thinking that, I was thinking that that's a very valid question, because the Southern Cameroons is there in the Gulf of Guinea and also the Niger Delta. And along the line, the security, when you look at the ethnic factor from the north, through the former Northern Cameroon, Yola, the other states, right down to the Gulf of Guinea, and you look at the ethnic sector, it is playing with fire by this war against South. It's playing with fire. They have been going on for 9 years. And I can tell you why it's playing with fire. They were trust territories. The French Cameroon is the Southern Cameroons. And it takes me back to the judgment of the ICJ, Cameroon, Niger, they talk about Bakassi. The foundation is the borders inherited boundaries at independence. But I think paragraph 270 of the judgment, first and foremost, that principle was never applied. And secondly, the question of nationality is it is something that you have to look into. But the United Nations is the easiest case that was determined by going back to the United Nations foundation architecture that determined the fate of the Southern Cameroon. We'll go back to it. It is based on international law, and one of the bases also of international law, the basis of the erga omnes obligation of all states in the world is on that. And for Cameroon one day to just get up and say, look, we annex the territory. You know what happened with Eritrea and Ethiopia? They had a similar arrangement. And when Ethiopia said, we annex you, there's no federation architecture, the UN organized another referendum, international referendum, and the people accepted their right. I think it's wholly wrong for 9 years to exterminate and kill men and women. The sheer number of victims across the board in Nigeria, abduction of people in the sovereign territory of Nigeria and carrying them to Cameroon, the deployment of people killing and burning more than 470 settlements, the extermination is one of the most unreported, but the most heart-wrenching extermination of people. I called it at the ICC when the journalist from Uganda asked me. I said, this is one of the modern genocide that is going on, and nobody pays attention. But all what the international community, starting with African Union, had to do was to say, let us sit down and examine the root causes. Africa should own its own conflict, examine the root causes, and implement them. The bloodletting of this continent is too much. Human life has lost its value. If you ask yourself, when I say the French, the oil reserves on the other side, in the Gulf of Guinea, the Niger Delta, on the part of Cameroon, is the territory of Southern Cameroons. So who are the people exploiting the oil? For what purpose is this war? How come it that, for example, the judgment about Bakassi, they determined, and only, I think about a year and a half ago, we now see that Cameroon now proposed, Nigeria and Cameroon all just make an agreement to exploit the hydrocarbons. Because the ICJ said, we are not determining the question of nationality. But there are several United Nations conventions on the right of indigenous people, the protection of indigenous people. Because now, no convention in the world can impose a nationality on people. Russia and others are going to war in the world because of nationality question. How come in this particular issue of Southern Cameroon, Bakassi, or others, you reserve, you say you are not determining, you are talking about petroleum hydrocarbons, and not talking about the nationality issue. So exactly, that is what we call neo-colonialist judgments that can never be implemented. You sow the seed of conflict. the fighting and fighting, that was in that playing with fire. Because that conflict will only escalate as long as both sides of the borders, you have people of the same ethnicity. It was just like asking Nigeria to attack Niger, knowing that on both sides you have people of the same ethnicity. On both sides of the southern Cameroons and Nigeria, you have people of the same nationality. So it's a playing with fire. So the problem is that this conflict, the United Nations, African Union, and Nigeria was supposed, who's the giant? Nigeria, the giant of Africa. Nigeria is expected to be the African candidate for the Security Council. They should start by being people, the mediators, to sit back and hear and rally the rest of Africa to sit and look at the road forces. But to think that you can dominate people and enforce them, Nigeria was able to bring peace in Niger Delta by sitting down and talking with the people, examine the root causes. Cameroon government can never and will never use force to dominate the southern Cameroonians because the battle has been going on for 9 years, going to continue. And France is supplying the weapons. Why must France be always there to supply the weapon? And I'm not the one saying it. The Minister of Communication of Chad issued a statement, which I have, saying 47% of the weapons come from France. Come from France. How come it that right now we now have this factor of cartel-ras? That factor was never the Southern Cameroon fight, but now cartel-ras now are now brought in to exterminate and kill people in Gabu, men and women in their houses. How the factor of cartel-ras now transport? How has Cameroon brought in cartel-ras that solves the battle to exterminate? And when they ask, they say, no, these are Nigerians. So you say that in Cameroon, you don't have people cartel-ras of the same ethnicity. Are they not the same people? How do you characterize them? So for me, that question is valid. They're playing with fire.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yeah. Thank you so much for your response. Yeah. Okay, so we have another question. Another participant is asking that looking at the time and age, if we really need ECOWAS, or whether ECOWAS has been useful in the last 15 years in view of all that has happened.
ECOWAS has been very effective. The structures of ECOWAS as it is, look at the legal framework of ECOWAS. ECOWAS has been, look at the legal framework of ECOWAS. Look at the revised protocol. Look at the mandate to help other countries struggling with security challenges. That ECOWAS. And ECOWAS has been acting within the framework of the United Nations Charter. Article 52. They have been acting within that framework. The problem now is that on the ground, you have competing frameworks, treaty frameworks. You have Francophonie. You have Commonwealth, to start from that. Then you have colonial treaties by France. You have the presence of French soldiers in Niger. You have the presence of French soldiers in the Gulf of Guinea. You have the French soldiers in Côte d'Ivoire. You have the French soldiers in Senegal. You have French soldiers in ECOWAS countries. Under security arrangements, you have economic arrangements, bilateral economic arrangements. And imagine if realistically, if ECOWAS were able to go to deploy forces to help Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso to fight the terrorists, how would ECOWAS have been able to do that with the presence of French soldiers, military base, and American military base in the region? How were they going to do this in the presence of this? Two, ECOWAS, do they really have the resources to do this? If they cannot, many of the countries are hamstrung, but in fact, they do not also control their monetary policy, their economic policies. Bilateral neo-colonialist framework. Some of them are rising from the local colonial taxes, kidnapping, and killing of people, controlling the change. They will have the coup d'etat. We have a unconstitutional change of government in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. But the number of countries that have now changed their framework to remove term limits, manipulate elections, which are a sham. Looking at the African Union definition of consider change of government, that includes all this. So you can see. So ECOWAS, look at the treaty framework, look at the effort. They established ECOWAS court, and they've delivered some of the jurisprudence. Just that they disregard for the enforcement of the judgments of this court, of this court. So at the end of the day, of course, look at the peacekeeping operations. Look at ECOWAS intervention in Sierra Leone. It was not a threat. Peacekeeping operation. Monitoring operations in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, in Cote d'Ivoire. I think ECOWAS has been very, very effective. The other problem with Niger is this threat of force and coercive measures and economic blockade, which helped the oppressors, that helped the new colonial forces, that helped the colonial agenda, not that of ECOWAS. In fact, sorry, it went against the very, very foundational objective of ECOWAS. And that led the immediate cause of the split. But that was also a question of victims taking measures that ran counter, that were going to work against them because the threat of force had been realized. You have been doing the bidding. Nigeria and the other countries that were threatening force had nothing to gain if they use force against this country, apart from setting the whole of West Africa on fire for the benefit of those countries.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, we just have one last question before we call it a day. This participant wants to know, considering the historical and cultural ties between the Sahel countries and the Maghreb region, could a potential breakaway of Sahel countries from ECOWAS lead to a reorientation of their economic and security partnership towards the Arab Maghreb Union? And what would be the geopolitical implications of such a shift from West Africa and African continent as a whole? It's a lengthy question.
Yes, but it's an important question because that put the challenges faced by the Sahel countries of Africa in perspective. You will know the problem about the relations between Mali, Niger, and Algeria. The breach in diplomatic relations and withdrawal with them, and also between Algeria and France, and also the Maghreb countries. You raise an important question. Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other forces that were in Iraq and in the Middle East, how did they find refuge in the Sahel? Before 2003, American attack Al-Qaeda of Iraq. Before that attack, were Al-Qaeda and others operating, apart from the fact that the attack in Nairobi, the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, and in Dar es Salaam, and also in Juba? Did you have Al-Qaeda and other operating in ECOWAS countries in West Africa, even the Sahel? Did you have them? ISIS and others that were operating in the Middle East and those countries, were they there? They submitted the killing of Muammar Gaddafi, the bombardment of Libya, opened the floodgates to bring all these forces. They were outsourced to Africa. And the assault is continuing in the sense that some of the people under the pressure of migrants that were in England, before the change of government in England, that the English government, the conservative government, had wanted to send them to Rwanda. So once in Rwanda, they can be trained as mercenaries and sent to destabilize the rest of Africa. And only of late, the United States now also sends prisoners and others to Rwanda, to Eswatini, and South Sudan. Africa becomes the dumping ground to send violent criminals and others to come and destabilize the continent, and for the benefit, economic benefit of a few dictators and a few neo-colonialist agents on the continent. And therefore, the country of the Niger have not aligned with the Maghreb countries. They have not changed. That's why I said the ideological perspective, the ideological challenges, the perspective of the Sahelian country, look at the ideology, it's really true independence. What they used to call desertification, which is climate change, that they go through, that's all. It's affecting us. They are the battleground. They are the forefront of the battle for the emancipation and for the liberation and independence of Africa. They are carrying the weight on our behalf. They let go. These forces, when the intention was not to remain, to fight and take over Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, to remain there. It was a gateway to take over the whole of West Africa, right up to the Atlantic Ocean and continuing to the rest of Africa. And therefore, Africa becomes the land for prisoners. Just like prisoners were outsourced to other countries, they exterminated the indigenous population and took over. And therefore, the country, the extermination of Africa and the black race and Africans will be complete. It is a wide ideological fight. So the countries of Sahel, far from that, understand them. The problem with Algeria and the other countries will not be going on to the extent of even withdrawing ambassadors. They are carrying the battle on their head. Just like Nigeria is carrying the battle of the multinational force on behalf of us or the whole Africa. And Nigeria, Niger, and others are still in the multilateral force. They are still deemed to be fighting multilateral force against these forces. So there's still a link between Nigeria and some of the countries with the Sahel countries against a common enemy, a common threat. It is still holding on. The fact is that the involvement of these people to say we are supporting the multilateral force poses problem because, irrespective of the fact that they say they are happy, the proliferation of weapons continues, the flow of money continues. The question we ask, and somebody asked this question to me a few days ago, who is Boko Haram? Who's behind Boko Haram? Where are the forces behind the mask? So with the intelligence architecture they had, they could be able to identify the leader of ISIS in other countries and Al-Qaeda. Why can they not unmask what are the forces? Who is Boko Haram? If not, if they cannot say they were there in Niger and other fighting against Boko Haram and other and the terrorist forces, who are they? They can't say whom they are. And they continue to disseminate people. If they cannot say, and there's a flow of money, the arms, take note, the people committing crimes, even the international criminal court and others, about African conflict, and not necessarily Africans. The world has evolved that they have similar ability to somebody to be in Washington or in Paris and be directing war. The merchants for weapons, the merchants of the weapons, the arms merchants for minerals in Sierra Leone, in the Congo, and not necessarily in Africa or Africans, or in the Sahel, other multilateral corporations or states, architecture. So where are they? Who are they? They should first of all bring out the intelligence. What the intelligence shows them. Who are they? Have they brought a single one of them for justice in their country? For the harm caused in Africa? No. So to say the Sahel countries, no. The Sahel countries are actually at the forefront of the battle, just like Nigeria. And the fact to the extent that they are still in the multilateral force with Nigeria and others fighting against these criminals, that multilateral arrangement had not collapsed, irrespective of the fact that they have moved from ECOWAS, shows that the ability for us to fight together. There is no reason to say that I've joined the Bahrain countries. My problem with the people up should be found in the fact that those people who are killing and terminating thousands of migrants from Africa in the Mediterranean Sea, why have there never been an investigation? Why have there never been investigation to find about the flow of migrants and to objectivize Africans and the cultural factors? No, we must put a human face to Africans, a human face to our culture, to our own cultural factors, to our own institutions, meaning ECOWAS. And ECOWAS, meaning also recognize Africa, will also recognize the alliance of Sahel states. It is a reality. We must now work with that reality for us to work together and try to see how we can build the faces, and continue with the foundational objectives and ideology of ECOWAS, which is shared. The Sahelian countries have not said they're against the foundational objective. On the contrary, they say they are the ones who are actually implementing these objectives, because the other countries have moved away from the objectives.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you for that elaborate response once again. Please, we still have another participant that would want to ask a question. So I'll invite him now to ask his question. Please, you have the floor. Yes, you can unmute. Yes, unmute and ask your question. The participant with the title iPhone, you can unmute and ask your question. If he's not yet ready, Mr. Nketia can unmute and make his contribution. Mr. Nketia can make his contribution.
Yeah, hello?
Yes, we can
hear me.
Yes.
Very well. Mine is just an intervention. I've listened critically to the erudite submission by our speaker. And I think he has touched on the major issues that actually address the question that was posed for him. My only problem with the presentation has to do with his observation that the ECOWAS legal tests actually do not comprehensively define what constitutional regime is and then what constitutes its interruption. I slightly beg to differ on that, because if you look at the protocol on good governance, and then even before that, protocol relating to measures for conflict prevention, management, resolution, peacekeeping, and security. The combined reading of these protocols actually give one's the ideal of what ECOWAS contemplates as a constitutional regime and what will constitute its interruption. And to say that I agree with him on the larger note that ECOWAS is doing well, but they have to be proactive, particularly when he mentioned when we have constitutional regiments.
Like this.
So mine is just an intervention, and as I have already submitted on the platform, to me, at the end of the day, the question is not about government alone, but about the destiny of our people. And therefore, whether disagreement or collective responsibility lies with us to ensure the regional integration works. And that is why civil society, like community law, is doing very well. And that's my intervention. But just to correct the view that proper reading of the ECOWAS text will tell you that what is constitutional regime and what will amount to its interruption is well defined if one wants to adhere to the principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nketia. Chief, I don't know if you want to respond to that observation.
Well, we have also to look at the constitutions of these countries. It is a blueprint. It is a blueprint in the constitution that they require that to be consistent with the ECOWAS protocol, as the case may be, because ECOWAS has consistently endorsed those changes. They have not taken any action to endorse them, and therefore give the impression that for them right now, practically, constitution of government is when there's a coup d'etat. I think that's the perspective we are seeing. The AU has been more proactive, has been open up in a way, and have been consistent in the way they deal with the constitutional change of government. They are right from the Alger Declaration or the Lomé Declaration. The IU for me actually be very, 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 very concerned, but the ECOWAS has been very inconsistent, to say the least.
Thank you, Chief. Please, Sir Andag, please, can you mute your microphone, please? Okay, I don't know if our last participant is ready to ask his question. Are you ready now?
Yes, please.
Okay, please go on. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is quite an interesting topic, and I believe that it has been quite reasonably dissected. My question is, looking into the militarization of ECOWAS as it is ongoing by foreign troops, is it practicable to suggest, or rather argue, that there is possible an undisclosed renewal of idea of economic scrambling and partitioning of West African states by other means than recolonization? I would like some insight on this, because this is actually creating exceptional difficult position for civilians who are now looking at what is happening in Ukraine and the manner with which the European leaders have all gathered themselves together to see how they can stop that war by all means possible, including engaging in intense nuclear war with Putin or Russia. But this is completely different from what is happening in West African states. So I am quite very excited by the insight as to what the speaker has really fed us with. I think there are so many concerns, which my questions is really, it will be appreciated if some insight can be provided to my question, please.
Well, we must live with the reality that Africa should the sooner we agree on our own, the better. And let me say why. When you look at, especially with the New World Order, the rules-based world that we knew is soon collapsing, or has collapsed on its weight. But with Africa, what they design for Africa, the question of is that the Europeans, they define themselves as Europeans. Their peace and security architecture coming to save one of their own when the attack is there. But look at Africa carefully. The fact that there were peacekeeping operations that we have, for example, they are paid for sometimes by the European Union. The AU Secretariat is either built by Chinese or paid by European Union, or the peace operation in Côte d'Ivoire. France came with Operation Lecon. They say, oh, we are paying for this. And also, with regard to African recolonization and things like that, attack in West Africa and the question of resources, you will see that even in smaller things, even with us here, you'll find that the monetary union, the French monetary union.
Vote of thanks. You want to talk? Coming out to do vote of thanks.
I'm coming to listen to the so-called the countries of Central African countries, monetary regime going right to West Africa. So we should be in the position to say that the basic principles on conflict resolution, the conflict resolution architecture, and also the question of defense, the defense architecture of the African countries themselves being in a position to be able to defend themselves, to stop the question of one country or another trying to colonize others to use the use of force on Africa. I pointed out that ECOWAS, at least they went to Sierra Leone, they went to Liberia, they went to Cote d'Ivoire. They tried to deploy their economic forces. There were difficulties, you know, including how to finance the operations, you know. But in the neighboring southern Cameroons, where people more than 46,000 have been exterminated on a daily basis, nobody says in the African Union, nobody is quiet. Now, this bloodbath we have in the Sahel, the Sahelian countries themselves have to invite some forces, either from the other forces from the east and others, in order to come in and try to help them. Africa should realize that we're on our own. The question of Ukraine and others is there. We're on our own. The African Union, in the manner in which you find it today, you heard me talk about ECOWAS country endorsing fraud. And even when the ECOWAS court has intervened, the very country refused to enforce the decisions of our own court. Even when we have the Malabo Protocol in order to have African courts to try certain cases, that Malabo Protocol criminalizes more crimes than any other justice architecture in the world. The African countries do not want to ratify it or to sign up to it. You have even the African Court, the African Court of Human and People's Rights. Many of the African countries are still refusing to be in that part. The few that were there, some of them have withdrawn. And therefore, Africa is on its own. We should be able to own the complexity of our own problems and be able to start something. This is not about the threat of the use of force, but we should be able to build a democratic culture and economic structure that belongs to Africa. If we do not, I want to hang on the colonialist treaties. The reality is that with Trump, the new Trump regime, there is a new world order that leaves Africa on own. NATO and others in Europe, they are trying to rebuild and to protect themselves. Africa is on its own. And if Africa is on its own, you become the world of colonial. They come back and they colonize you and impose a decision and even topple your government and send troops in and kill, and it will be worse. And therefore, it's the moment African allies when you and stop this bloodletting. And you make sure that if they refuse, you say that anybody who is killing, fueling these wars, has nowhere to go. Universal jurisdiction. Africa was given a universal jurisdiction. If somebody were killing people in the southern Cameroon or in Nigeria and runs to Ghana, you should be arrested there and tried and put on trial immediately. You have nowhere to escape. So we should try different forms. I do not know where it's better for, but Africa's right that the new world order is here and we're on our own.
Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you for this elaborate response once again. And thank you for the teaching. It's now time for me to invite the Executive Director of the Center of Community and Oceanic Law, Professor Amos Enabulele, for the vote of thanks and final remarks. Prof.
Thank you, Mike. I'll just make one small final remark, and pass it over to Taiwo to give the vote of thanks. Yes, Mr. Taku, thank you very much for your support always, and thank you, sir. You know, I think what the comparison that the chief was making, if you look at the African protocol, is the protocol that is called now Charter on Good Governance, it is the only one that defined extension of constitutional term. You don't find that in the ECOWAS Good Governance Protocol. You know, I think there are some variations that Chief was speaking to. I'm not sure he had enough time to elaborate on those two instruments. You know, so the African Union one appears to be more elaborate because it actually defines what it means, included extension of constitutional term, which Chief mentioned. If my memory serves me right, I believe there's a bit of variation between those two instruments. I would like to call on Taiwo Roboyo to give the vote of thanks, please.
All right, sir. Thank you very much, Prof. And to the speaker, we are very grateful to have you, sir. We are honestly glad of how you have taken us on an intellectual ride. We are really, really grateful for exposing us to the topic as a whole. I mean, taking us through the topic in details about the pros and cons of the exits of this Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from ECOWAS. We are really very grateful, and for also clarifying several questions posed to you. It means a lot to us, and we have also me myself personally have gained a lot because I'm still a student, so I've gained a lot, and I really appreciate. Also to our invitees who made it to the program, we are also very, very, very grateful to have you all. I can see a couple of my lecturers here. I'm very glad to see you. I'm very glad we are glad to have you on board. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much also.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming, and have a great day.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.